Hello, welcome to Public Administration 3305, where American public policy comes alive. And we are kicking off an exciting week for really a pretty interesting topic this week, which is policy implementation. I wanted to go over a couple of interesting examples with you right now, give a brief overview of implementation, and then give you a couple of pretty interesting examples just to help drive home what exactly we're talking about this week. So, just a big picture overview. Last week we talked about from agenda setting through research and analysis, and then legitimation. So, making sure those policies were going to be feasible, were going to work, and then this week we're talking about okay, we've made it where man that policy was legitimized and even it's been voted into a law, okay, and policy has been set by the policymakers, and so now the charge is to implement it, and usually that implementation is going to be passed down to some sort of a federal agency or to, if it's at a state or local level, onto some sort of a program or group or department that's going to be implementing this policy, okay, or at least serving as a watchdog, making sure that this policy is put into effect, okay, and the changes are made that are desired so that it will create the intended changes, okay. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One very recent one is the PPP program. It's called the Payroll Protection Program. The Small Business Administration uh, put forth a law that made several $100 billion available for small businesses as a result of the coronavirus and the impact on small businesses. They didn't want the federal government did not want small businesses to close and or lay off employees as a result of the contraction from the coronavirus. And so what they did was they partnered with banks to push out these hundreds of billions of dollars out to small businesses. And so banks literally shifted a lot of what they did and started to implement these small business loans, and and made over 1 million loans to small businesses that were basically forgivable loans that were designed, if businesses use that money to keep people employed, then and kept them on the payroll, then they are entitled to forgiveness under assuming they meet certain criteria and under certain conditions. So they could be forgiven those loans because they were used to keep people employed. So this was a program, and so banks in this situation were responsible for implementing the policy. Okay, so this is an interesting public-private partnership where pretty innovative actually, where the intended recipients of the program were small businesses, but the government didn't administer the actual loans. It was the private banks across the United States that did so, that had the relationships with the small businesses. So very interesting. I'll give you another example. So this is actually when I was at the uh, uh, Department of Agriculture in Austin, and we had the school nutrition programs were administered through the Department of Agriculture. They still are in Austin at the state level, and so the federal government funds the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Agriculture is able to administer those funds for school nutrition programs as well as other nutrition programs, but mainly those funds are used for the school nutrition programs, okay, related to the federal nutrition funding that they get. And so basically what happened, which is really interesting, in 2010, the healthy No Hungry Kids Act. I don't. That's not the exact name of it. I can't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but was passed, and so schools literally had a couple of years to really figure out how they were going to implement these changes that the school nutrition programs policies had put into effect, and really it came down to uh, amount of calories that were allowed to go out, and then amount of different proportions, what types of foods were allowed, how these kids received the foods, and then who was entitled to food, free meals and these other things. And so the schools, if you imagine, every school in the entire country had to all of a sudden start abiding to these nutrition standards that drastically cut the proportions of meat that could be served, and then drastically increased the proportions of vegetables that had to be served on every plate for lunch. Then you start to see that there's a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of people involved, and there's a lot of personalities involved, and a lot of programs and schools that at every level. You're talking about large urban campuses. You're talking about small rural campuses that really had to start just changing things up in the way that they delivered food to all the kids. And so, um, at the state level, that role not only was to fund the schools, but also to educate and help administer this change. So to educate the campuses, make sure that they knew what the new guidelines were, and then advise on tips for success, strategies for success. Make sure they understood the deadlines. Okay, so you have all these different groups involved. You had parents involved that were angry that their kids weren't going to be getting enough meat with their lunches, and the kids didn't want to eat so many vegetables, and then the school administrators had various opinions about it as well. And so it's a really interesting study. And okay, so at the very top level at the federal agencies, they made a decision, and the administration at the time made a decision that this should be the nutrition policy, and then it was up to the states to fund schools for the new initiatives, and also to make sure that schools were implementing these changes, to in their campuses. So not only fund them and educate them, but also then make sure they were meeting the compliance standards. Okay, and then at the local level, you can see that it's being pushed down bit by bit. Not only the funds, but the implementation of this policy, the Healthy No Hungry Kids Act, right, of 2010. And so it took 2 or 3 years, actually a full 3 years, for this policy to actually go into effect, where schools actually had to start doing it. But all through that 3 years, all this preparation was happening, and then it was finally implemented. And they're saying now, a report just came out, a study just came out, that they have created healthier results for kids, and so better nutrition for the kids that have been on the school lunch programs. But then you also have the kids that never were on the school nutrition programs at all in the first place, and so never ate school lunch and these things. And so they're saying there was no effect there at all from the programs, which is interesting. It didn't seem to translate through to healthier eating habits for all children, but just the ones that were on the programs. Anyway, that's just what the latest studies have shown. But hey, I'll turn you loose. I just wanted to check in with you and tell you a couple stories. Hope y'all are having a great day, great week. Get with me if you need anything. Thanks.